New York has hosted the US Open for over 100 years. We've watched Serena say goodbye. We've watched Federer break down in tears. We've watched Sinner get crowned. But in the last week of August 2026, staff at Flushing Meadows admitted something they'd never had to say before. They had never once planned for this. An entire foreign country's population showing up to watch one player who, 12 months earlier, wasn't even famous in her own country. She's 21. She's 5'9". And quietly, without most of the sport noticing until it was too late to ignore, she's become the most successful tennis player the Philippines has ever produced, man or woman, in over 100 years of the sport being played there. Her name is Alex Eala. And this is the story of how a player from a country with almost no tennis infrastructure to speak of is now driving ticket sales, rewriting record books, and forcing one of the biggest tournaments on the planet to admit it simply wasn't ready for her. Let's start with the numbers, because once you see them, everything else about this story starts to make sense. At the start of 2025, Eala sat at 130th in the world. Respectable, the kind of ranking that gets you into qualifying draws and not much else. Fast forward 20 months to August 24th, 2026, the day before the US Open draw, and she hit a career high of world number 18. That's the highest ranking any Filipino, or honestly any Southeast Asian player, man or woman, has ever reached in WTA Tour history. And once you start listing what that ranking actually represents, it gets almost absurd. She's the first Filipino to crack the world's top 20, the first to beat a top 10 opponent, the first to reach the fourth round of a Grand Slam, the first to make a WTA 1000 semifinal, and the first, so far, the only Filipino to win a WTA Tour singles title, which she pulled off this month in Washington, D.C. So how long was this drought she just ended? You'd have to go back to 1988, to a Davis Cup run that briefly put Philippine tennis on the map, to find the last time the sport actually mattered there on a global stage. After that, almost 30 years of nothing. No majors, no top 100 rankings, no real international relevance. And remember, this is a country where basketball, boxing, and volleyball dominate the sports conversation. Tennis was never supposed to be what produced a global star. Eala didn't just end the drought. She turned a niche curiosity into a full-blown national movement, and she did it faster than almost anyone in the modern history of the sport. Most players take 4 or 5 years to climb from the 130s into the top 20. She did it in under 2. The signs were there early. Eala was already the first Filipina to win a junior Grand Slam title, climbing as high as world number 2 in the juniors. But here's what actually separates her from most junior prodigies. She didn't stall out once she turned pro, which is exactly what derails so many talented teenagers. She just kept climbing, year after year, until the results finally caught up to the hype that had followed her since she was a teenager training at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca. She comes from a family with deep roots in Philippine sports and the resources to develop a child's talent at the highest level. She started playing at age 4 at Valley Verde Country Club in Pasig City. Her grandfather, Roberto Mano, was her first coach, the one who put a racket in her hands and showed up to every practice. By 12, it was clear she'd outgrown everything the Philippines could offer her. So at 13, Alex and her brother moved to Mallorca, Spain, to train at the Nadal Academy on a full scholarship. But getting to the point of even being considered for that scholarship at a facility that charges $60,000 a year required years of private coaching, international travel, and a family able to fund all of it. 13 years old, halfway around the world, because the Philippines simply had no path to get her where she needed to go. None of this happened in a vacuum either. Behind her is a small team, including coaches from her Nadal Academy years, in an environment that had already produced multiple top 50 players before she ever arrived. And the support system around her sponsorships, scheduling, basic tournament logistics has had to scramble to professionalize as her results kept outrunning everyone's expectations, including, by most accounts, the Philippine Tennis Federation's own. Now here's a number that should genuinely stop you. Eala's pre-tournament press conference at this year's US Open was watched online by 171,000 people. For comparison, Carlos Alcaraz's press conference for that same tournament pulled 29,000 viewers. Coco Gauff's pulled 29,000. Aryna Sabalenka's pulled 9,000. A player who wasn't even seeded outdrew three of the biggest stars in tennis, combined in press conference viewership alone. This pattern didn't start in New York. Rewind to January to the Australian Open. Eala, then ranked 49th in the world, was greeted by hundreds of Filipino fans during a practice session outside Melbourne Park. She'd just become the first Filipino player to win a Grand Slam match, back at the 2025 US Open. And the reception in Melbourne showed the crowds hadn't gone anywhere. Fans swarmed her for autographs and photos after practice. She stopped, said hello, signed what she could, and moved on. Organizers had put her first-round match on Court 6, a venue that holds about 1,500 people. It wasn't close to enough. Security had to start clearing standing areas mid-match because the overflow crowd spilled into walkways that were never built to hold that many people. Some fans had been standing for hours, some without tickets at all, just hoping to catch the crowd noise from outside the gates. Tournament staff later admitted, quietly, that nothing in their planning documents had accounted for a scenario like this. Not for a player ranked outside the top 40. That was Melbourne in January. By August, nobody working these tournaments was surprised anymore. It had simply become the expectation. Then came Washington. Eala won her first WTA Tour singles title there this month. And the tournament's owner and chairman said it plainly at the trophy ceremony, this might be the greatest crowd he'd ever seen for a Monday final. Think about what that actually means. This wasn't a Saturday night showcase with a marketing push behind it. This was a Monday afternoon, the kind of slot that usually draws whoever happens to be off work. Instead, the stadium was packed with Philippine flags of every size, fans chanting her name before nearly every service game, drowning out the sport's usual polite hush. It wasn't only the fans reacting, either. Jessica Pegula, the player on the losing end of that final, stood at the podium afterward and in front of a crowd that had spent the whole match rooting against her. Praised how Eala had handled the fandom and the stardom that had come with representing the Philippines, calling it a genuine sign of her maturity, both as a player and as a person. That's one of the Wote's most established Americans, on American soil, publicly crediting a foreign fan base for elevating the sport in front of her. Off camera, the tournament director went further, telling reporters that roughly 80% of all ticket inquiries during the entire event were specifically about Eala. That single number turns this from a passing viral moment into something closer to a changing of the guard. And it isn't just the fans losing their minds over her. It's her opponents. It's the biggest names in the sport. During that same Washington run, Eala beat a staggering run of names back-to-back. A reigning Olympic gold medalist, a defending tournament champion, a former world number 3, and a 4-time Grand Slam winner, Naomi Osaka, in the semifinal. Afterward, reporters asked Osaka directly about Eala's ceiling as a player. Osaka pointed out that when her own match had ended that day, she'd noticed Eala's practice court completely packed before Eala had even walked on full of Philippine flags, with some of those same fans cheering for Osaka herself earlier in the day. Osaka called it awesome, called the fans kind, and said it was genuinely great to watch Eala build a new community around the sport. Coming from someone who has actually won 4 majors and knows exactly what it means to carry a country's attention on her own shoulders, calling a 21-year-old outside the top 20 an inspiration is not a small thing. Weeks before that, at Wimbledon, Eala had already served notice by beating defending champion Barbara Krejcik. And when she landed in Toronto for the Canadian Open the week after Washington, the exact same scene repeated itself before she'd even played a real match. Back home, none of this is being treated like a sports story anymore. It's a national event. Back in July, before the Washington breakthrough, Eala was summoned to Malacanang Palace, where President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. personally handed her a presidential citation, one of the country's highest civilian honors, usually reserved for people with decades of achievement behind them, given here to a 21-year-old still building her career. Then there's Manny Pacquiao, arguably the most famous Filipino athlete alive, a boxing legend and a sitting senator who publicly congratulated her after the Washington win, thanking her for bringing honor to the country. When a boxing legend and a sitting president are both publicly aligning themselves with a tennis player, in a country where tennis has historically ranked behind basketball, boxing, and volleyball, That's not just fandom anymore. That's a cultural shift happening in real time. And club administrators back home say that shift might matter more long-term than any single trophy because it means the next Alex Eala might already be picking up a racket for the first time this year, somewhere in a country that used to produce almost no tennis talent at all. The same pattern has followed her all year. Organizers plan for a normal tournament, and a nation shows up instead. What makes this different from a typical underdog wave is that it isn't fading. Every stop this year has been bigger than the last. Melbourne was the warning shot. Washington was the proof. 20 months ago, Alex Eala was ranked 130th in the world. Today, she's the most successful tennis player the Philippines has ever produced, a player Naomi Osaka calls inspiring. A player tournament directors are rearranging their entire logistics around. A player a sitting president felt compelled to personally honor. The US Open has hosted legends before. But has it ever had to prepare for a fan base that doesn't just watch a match, but turns an entire afternoon session into something closer to a national holiday? Not like this. If Melbourne was the warning and Washington was the preview, then New York, with Eala now through to a second-round Grand Slam match for the first time in her career, might just be the loudest chapter yet.